In this lesson, we'll be learning how to apply adjustment layers. I currently have two files open side by side. I have the starter file on the left and a file on the right that I already applied some adjustment layers to give you an idea of where we're going with this. If you take a look over here at my layer structure, what I intend to do today is to isolate the girl from the background, from that white background, and you can see a layer mask there that's been applied, and simply apply a gradient in the background on another new layer. And above here, these things are what are called adjustment layers. The beautiful thing about adjustment layers is they are what we call non-destructive. So they will never directly affect the pixel or change the pixel. And you can see here I do have a view and a hide button here, and I can turn them both off. And this is the natural state of the image without the layers applied. And of course, I can apply them by turning the visibility back on. You'll notice here the masks, one is inverted from the other. This one right here for the hue saturation, and I named it hair at the end, is strictly controlling the hair, and in fact I have it also controlling the color of the front of her top here so that it kind of matches. So to give you an example, I click on that right now. In my properties, I should see the parameters for that particular adjustment layer. And you may need to scroll, or you can pull it out. Actually, you know what? Let me pull the properties panel out and fix it to this bar here. And that will show you all of what I have to work with. Now in this case, I turned on the colorize. I can turn that off and it's back to its default. But I want to apply color. So I click colorize and I just went with the purple hair basically. But if I slide this over, you can see how that only affects the masked area. And in this case, it happens to be the hair and the girl's top. Okay, so if I want to go back to that purple, I'll just slide it back there. Number of things I can do with any of these adjustment layers, but this is one distinct example here, and I'll just close that off there. And this adjustment layer here is called Vibrance, and it's a little more subtle in what it does, but I have it currently masking the face area, you know, all the flesh area basically, the shoulders, the neck, and the ear and the face. All right, as you can see here by that mask. And if I click on there and go to its properties, this only has two sliders, the vibrance and the saturation. And again, it's a more subtle one. I can show you here. It kind of gives you a certain richness, and that's in combination with the saturation, of course. And I'll just close that. Okay, so there are two adjustment layers. Now you'll notice here too, they have little arrows pointing down. Both of these do. What that means is that these are only directly affecting the pixel layer below them, which is this layer here with the girl. They are not affecting the layer below. By default, they would be. I'm going to turn those features off, and I'll explain how I did that shortly. Currently now, they are not associated with any layer, therefore they will affect all visible layers below. And that includes this background gradient that we have here. Okay, so if I want to just engage them with, in this case, the layer with the girl on it, I need to go in between the layers, and on the Mac it's the Option key, and on the PC it would be the Alt key, and you find that happy spot. When you see the arrow pointing down, you click it, and what it does is it attributes it to the layer below, and it will only work on that layer. Now I need to do it with the hair as well, because this one actually is masking the face area and doesn't include anything outside of the face area. So it's the one above here that is currently affecting both layers. So let me go again with my Option key down on the Mac, Alt key down on the PC, find that happy spot in between the layers and click it. And you should see the little crooked arrow pointing down. And now this layer as well is only affecting the pixel layer that's directly below it. Now with the mask, I've sort of added some complexity to it, where this one is not affecting the facial area, the skin area. So it's affecting the hair and everywhere else. So that's how that works, and I think right now is probably a good time to start a new file. Okay, so we're going to use the file on the left as our starter file. And I think I'm just going to close this one right now. And we'll start with this. And I'm going to begin by saving it as a new file. And let me find a place for it here. Okay, and set it to Photoshop format. And name it your last name. And the lesson number. I believe this is 09A. I know I already have a file of this name, so I'm just going to go AB and save that. And we'll start with this. So to begin with, I'd like to isolate the background from the subject in the foreground. So to do that, I'm going to move down to this really excellent selection tool called the Object Selection Tool. It's a newer one and it works really well. You can either kind of drag across the subject, or I believe you can click inside and kind of drag within it. I'm just going to drag across the whole thing because we've got this very distinct white background, so it should be fairly easy for it to pick it out. And it may take a few seconds, and there we go. It's established a selection based on, what it calculated as the foreground object. So at this point, I'm just going to go and unlock my layer so that I can apply a layer mask to it, again based on this live selection. And I'm just going to go to my layer mask button, click that, and there you have it. It has a layer mask, which is now knocking out that white background. So I'm just going to save that and continue from here. And I'll go back to my move tool. So next, I think I'd like to just put a gradient in the background. So I'm going to create that on a new layer. So we'll go and start new layer. I'll give it a name, gradient. And just accept that and go over to my gradient tool and maybe establish some colors and then my gradient properties. So the foreground and background colors, I'm just going to stick to these warm hues, I think. And for my background color, I'll click on that and maybe just warm that up a bit as well. Make it lighter. Okay, like that. So with my gradient tool selected, let me go up here and establish the type of gradient. I will use the newer gradient setting, which actually generates a vector gradient. The nice thing about that is that it can be edited at any point while you're working on your file. You can come back to it and edit the colors and so on. I want to also establish that it's going foreground to background. There we go. And also establish that it's a linear gradient. So to create the gradient, you just click and drag. The start point is the foreground color, and when I release, that is the background color. You know what, I'm looking at this, I'm going to make it a little more on the yellowish side, like that. Okay, so I think I'm good to go at this point. I'm going to click inside near the top and drag down. Now I'm holding my shift key to constrain that, and I'm just going to release very close to the bottom and let it go. So there's my gradient. If I ever wanted to edit it, I just, while on the gradient tool, I can come back to it and double click on these circles and select a different color if I needed to. So I'm going to go back to my move tool. Now the one, of course, issue here is that it's covering up the image of the girl and we wanted it behind her. So I'm just going to drag that layer to the bottom, and now the subject is over top of the background gradient. Again, I'm just going to save that. So now I'm ready to apply an adjustment layer, and I want it to affect the layer that has the girl subject on it. So I'm going to click on that layer, and the next layer that I create will appear directly above it, because the adjustment layers work on all the layers directly below them, or rather all the layers below them. So as I pointed out, there are a number of ways to access the adjustments, but the quickest, shortest way is this little icon here that's a circle that's half black and half white. And if I click on it, I do see a list of all my various adjustments. I understand part of it's probably cut off from the capture software, but the one I want is called Hue Saturation. And what it does is it creates the new layer. So this is an adjustment layer, and it is named accordingly. I can change that name if I wanted to. And it automatically comes with a layer mask, which is completely white. Therefore, the layer will apply to the whole of the screen on the layers below. Okay. We are going to work with that mask a little later, but for now I'm going to leave it completely white. And this is my hue saturation set of properties. I did move my properties panel here so I could see the whole array and not have to really scroll. So what I want to use this property for is to do what's called colorizing. I want to do a monochromatic colorizing. So I'm going to start by clicking the colorize button. There is a lot of potential within this panel, but I'm going to cut to the chase with this colorizing feature. So I've clicked the colorize button, and my hue slider is the main thing. The saturation, of course, will increase the intensity as well. But let's start here. And you can see how it's changing the color. So I'm going to bring it over into the purple area. I will bring the saturation up, maybe about 50 for now. Okay. And you can see how it's affecting everything on the screen that are in the layers below. Okay, if I turn off the subject, it's affecting the background, the gradient, as well as the picture of the girl. Okay, so let me just close this properties panel. I will save this, and then we'll continue from here. So it would be pretty common that you would only want to apply an adjustment layer to a single layer. And the way that that would work is that you would attach it to the layer directly below it by using what's called a clipping mask. So I've right clicked. Again, it may be partly cut off here. There is create clipping mask with a right click, but the shortcut for doing that is on your keyboard on a PC, hold down the Alt key and go in between the layers, and you're going to see this icon show up with the little crooked arrow. On the Mac, it would be the option, hold the option key down and find that happy spot in between the layers. Okay. Once you see that icon, do a left click. What that does is it attaches that to the layer below and ignores all the other layers potentially below that. It is indicated by being indented a little bit and has that little crooked arrow on it. So now if you look at the screen, you will see that the yellowish toned background was not affected by this hue saturation adjustment layer. Okay. Now if I want to change that adjustment layer, if I want to change the settings, I can just double click on its icon here and it pops up in the properties. It may show up in a window here or it may show up here depending how you've nested that in with your panels. And again, the main slider here is the hue slider. And if I want to change colors, I can do that. Okay. I'm going to go back to the purple again, and maybe I'll make it a little more intense with my saturation. Maybe go up to about 60 or so. Okay, and I will close that. Now here's the thing. I don't want to change her skin color. I'd like to change the hair, and I'm happy to change the top as well to kind of coordinate with the hair color. So I'm going to use this mask here and generate, a mask that's going to block out the flesh sections, the shoulders, the front here of the chest, and the neck and the face. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use one of my nice selection tools, do a quick selection of the skin area. So I will need to go back to the layer with the girl on it, highlight that layer. Then go over to my selection tool called the quick selection tool. That one you click and drag, and you'll notice here it shows up as a circle. It's kind of like a brush. The shortcut keys are the square brackets next to the letter P on the keyboard. The right one increases the size, and the small one decreases the size. So if I'm going into tight areas, I would want a small brush. But right now I'm using big areas. I want the whole face, the neck, and shoulders. So I'm going to click on the screen, and when you drag around, it adds to similar pixels to the selection. At this point, I will decrease my brush size and come up into the bangs area here and try to capture a little bit more. I can ultimately refine this with my paintbrush on what will become the layer mask, but I can see the ear section up here. Just drag a little bit above there, and again the shoulders down here. Just drag across similar colored pixels. Okay, so that's pretty good there. Maybe a little more on the neck down here, like that. Okay, as I said, I can refine it after the fact as well. Oh, and I went too far, so let me do one undo. And maybe I'll just leave this eyebrow alone, and I'll come back and fix that with my paintbrush. So the idea here is that I want to fill black pixels in this layer mask up here that's associated with the adjustment layer. So I'm going to click on that specific layer mask right there. I do have black as my foreground color. If you don't, set black as your foreground color. And we're going to go Edit Fill. Fill with foreground color. Mode set to normal, opacity 100. Again, be doubly sure that you have the mask selected that's associated with the adjustment layer. Then click OK. And now I've created a mask which is basically blocking that effect in the flesh areas. I'm going to deselect, Command D, and I'm going to show you how you can kind of clean up some of these hard edges. Use your paintbrush. With that mask still selected, you would be painting black on top of that mask. So I could go in like this. Now, I see the last time I used this brush, it was at 45. If it's at 100, it will be fairly sharp, like that, okay? But I do have my softness, I believe, set, my hardness set to 0. Therefore, it will be like a soft brush. So I can go around. If I want to be more subtle, I can turn my opacity down. So let's say go down to 50 or so, and come down just along the edges, and I'm just clicking, kind of clicking at the edge of the hair, which will let some of that hair be transparent, or translucent rather, and it's a little better there. Okay, I'm just going to come up here as well. This is with my opacity turned down, and I am currently painting on the mask, which is controlling where the adjustment layer will basically be applied. So I'm going to turn that even lower and get very fussy here. So just coming in. Now as you keep going over the same area, it does compound. So you can do sort of very soft treatments by going over it many times with your opacity turned down. Okay, so I think that's fairly good there now. I definitely want to save that. Okay, so there's an adjustment layer. And we got a little more sophisticated with it in creating an isolated area by using the layer mask that comes associated with it. The other thing we did recently was associate the adjustment layer to the layer that is directly below it. Now, if I want to undo that, I don't think we did that. It's the same action. Option key on the Mac, Alt key on the PC, find that happy place between the layers and click it. And that disengages it from the layer directly below. The mask still applies, right? So the face will be blocked no matter what. We're safe there. But all that white area in the mask will apply that adjustment layer to the layers below. And in this case, it happens to also be the gradient layer. If I turn that off, of course, it's transparent and it won't apply to nothing, if you will. Okay, so let me reassociate that adjustment layer with the layer directly below. Mac, Option key down, PC, Alt key down, find that happy place in between the layers and click. There we go, and I'm definitely going to save that. All right, so we'll do one more, which will only affect the flesh areas this time. So I'm going to add another adjustment layer. So with that layer selected, when I create a new adjustment layer, it will appear directly on top of that. Let me go and select one here. And maybe I'll just go with, it's tough here. There's a lot of fun that I can have here. I'll go with something maybe more boring called Vibrance. So Vibrance, again, right now, and I see that it's not associating. So it's good to know that, okay? It's not associating automatically. Therefore, it will apply on all layers below it. So let me just go in here and really crank the saturation. And you can see how, you know, all the layers are getting very, very saturated. And Vibrance, it just kind of electrifies it. It's a subtle feature. It will be good for the flesh tones, I think. So how do I isolate that? I need to copy this mask into there and invert it. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to close this for a second. With my Option key down on the Mac, Alt key on the PC, you can click and drag to duplicate a mask layer. I'm going to drag it over top of that one. It's probably going to ask me, do you want to replace the existing one? Where I will say yes. Replace layer mask, yes. Now it's still the opposite of what I want. So with it selected, I'm just going to go Command I on the Mac, Control I on the PC. And that's the invert selection. If I go to my properties, it's also in there. You might have to scroll down a notch but there is the invert button. So I might as well just click this one right here. The shortcut though is Control I on the keyboard or Command I on the Mac. So now that effect is only working on the flesh tone. If I turn that off, you can see no other layers are being affected. Now it is pretty extreme. So I'm going to click on it and just kind of bring it down a bit here. Okay. Again, it's not affecting the background layer. It's only affecting the layers isolated by the white parts of the mask, which happens to be the flesh areas. Okay, so maybe I'll try a different one for that as well and turn this one off, but I'll just copy that mask. So let me generate yet another one here. Maybe something that will render some bigger changes. Color balance. Or actually, you know what? Let's go to levels. Levels. Okay, levels controls the lights, darks, and midtones. And right now, again, currently, it would be affecting all the layers below. If I can drag that up a bit here. So let's just, maybe let's kind of blow out the whites. Okay. And I'll actually bring that mid-tone down as well. And then bring the dark tone really up to bring the eyes back. Like that. So again, it's affecting the hair. It's affecting the background. I'm just going to start by option click and dragging this mask on the Mac. Alt click and drag the mask, and again replace, yes. And at this time it's isolated to the face. I don't really need to associate it with the one below, but formally I guess I will. I'm going to turn off vibrance, and you can see the slight difference with vibrance. I'm going to keep it on ultimately. It just gives it a little more electricity, I guess. It just pops it a little more. But if you want that blown out look, there you have it. And if I want to change those settings, I just select that particular adjustment layer. And in my properties, I will see the various properties that I can affect. Okay. So if I want to be more dramatic, of course, I can bring that slider back up. I can also go in and paint on the mask if I wanted to maybe just make the eyes pop, for example. So a lot we can do with that. Okay, there we go. And let me just turn that vibrance back on there. And it is pretty intense, in fact. Let me turn off levels. You can see how subtle the vibrance is. Again, I'll go to vibrance. Give that a lot more saturation. I think I'm going to leave my levels off, but I'll leave it in there as an option. Okay. So that basically is the roundhouse lesson on how to create adjustment layers. And again, the big deal about adjustment layers is they're non-destructive. They do not directly affect the pixels. They just project. So I'm going to attach this vibrance as well. And this is how you do it. Again, Alt key on the PC, Option key on the Mac. Now these two are directly affiliated with this. They are distinctly not affecting the background. The mask, in this case, actually it was affecting the background until I did that. It was just a subtle effect. Okay, if I turn that off, you see it's only the face that is changing. If I turn this off and on, it's only the hair. So once again, if I wanted to change the hair color, select that adjustment layer, go to my properties, and change the respective sliders. Okay, like that. And let's say I like that. There we go. We're going with an Irish theme, I guess. I will change it back. And I will increase the saturation for some reason with the purple, probably because it's a darker color. The saturation did give it a good bump. Okay, so I'd like you to create a similar file to this. Do at least 2 adjustment layers, apply them to the picture of the girl, knock out the background with a layer mask, and create a vector gradient in the background. You can choose all the colors of your choosing, but I do want to see the layer structure something similar to this. And that is our adjustment layers exercise.